So since the repeal of net neutrality rules by Ajit Pai, there have been a lot of states that have been trying to do their own net neutrality rules. Now, California actually had a pretty good chance of being able to have some of the strongest net neutrality protections in the country. However, corporate Democrats have put a stop to it. Gizmodo explains. 2 California state lawmakers had struck a deal on Monday to combine 2 net neutrality bills introduced separately this year, SB 822, which is incredibly strong, and SB 460. Now, both of those, which have cleared the state Senate, working in tandem, would have ensured that Californians that had the same level of protection against net neutrality violators that was ensured under the 2015 Open Internet Order, which established the federal net neutrality rules. Now, instead of accepting amendments, however, to combine 822 and 460 into one bill that would have been incredibly strong, the strongest net neutrality bill in the country, something that could have been a model for the rest of the United States, Assemblyman Miguel Santiago, chair of the Communications and Conveyance Committee, decided not to do that and decided to propose his own amendments. Now, those amendments would not add to the strength of this bill. Those amendments are taking away from the strength of this bill and watering it down. Now, Santiago, the source said, had intended to substantially diminish the end legislation's effectiveness, leaving enormous loopholes for internet service providers such as AT&T and Comcast to exploit. Now, it's important to note that he's doing this in favor of AT&T, and I'm going to, of course, show you why later on. Now, the plan to unify the two bills had been originally announced on Monday by Senators Scott Weiner and Kevin DeLeon. Now, the authors of SB 822 and 460, respectively. DeLeon, of course, is in favor of the weaker 460, and Weiner actually is author of 822, which is a strong net neutrality bill. Now, I'm going to explain why that's strong, but first, they got some interesting establishment support from Nancy Pelosi. Now, in a letter, Pelosi wrote to Santiago, "We will not settle for the weak bills pushed by the Republicans that eliminate crucial consumer protections and our net neutrality in name only." So basically what she was saying is, Santiago, don't fuck this up. Net neutrality is important, and I'm actually on the side of net neutrality. Well, that's interesting. Again, that's not something I would expect from Nancy Pelosi, so good on her for that. Santiago, however, was unmoved. Now, there was one thing about that letter, by the way, that did bother me, in that Santiago is not a Republican. He's not pushing a Republican bill. He's a Democrat, and he decided, I'm going to go against progressives, and I'm going to weaken this legislation that could have been very, very strong. But, of course, he's a corporate Democrat, and one that takes a lot of money from the industry. And the industry, thanks to this, is now celebrating. Gizmodo explains that the telecom industry had worked hard to disrupt the passage of California's net neutrality legislation, in particular SB 822. Now, that bill mirrors not only the handful of pages that make up the underlying rules of the 2015 Open Internet Order, but 300 pages worth of explanations contained in the order itself. Now, while the rules alone would prohibit ISPs from blocking and throttling internet traffic or creating so-called fast and slow lanes, the full order explains at length the reasons the rules exist and how they should be applied, codifying a number of protections that aren't explicitly laid out in the rule's simple text. So those 300 pages of explanations, that's also included in 822, and that would have made it incredibly strong. Now, the bill authored by DeLeon, who is a corporate Democrat, of course, SB 460 did not include these additional protections. However, if combined with 822, would have been the strongest net neutrality bill in the entire United States. Now, that is why they don't want this to happen, and that's why they paid Santiago so much money to sabotage it. According to sources, Santiago broke regular order and had the bill amended and severely weakened before Senator Weiner could even present his side. Senator Weiner, of course, is reportedly livid about this, while AT&T lobbyists were heard celebrating in the hallway. So that's to show you exactly why Santiago had done it. And if that's not clear enough, here's what Santiago also got in return. According to finance records, major ISPs have contributed to Santiago more than $29,000 during this election cycle alone, including $7,800 from AT&T and its affiliates. This is why this happened. Look, anybody who looks at California and says that is a progressive bastion, they're wrong. They're the establishment bastion. Yes, they are more liberal than a lot of the country because a lot of the country is incredibly backwards. And that is because, of course, Democrats have pretty much abandoned the rest of the country other than New York and LA. Now, I see a lot of people that are getting, really, really, I guess, frustrated, understandably, and really disheartened because of the recent losses in places like California. The California primary was incredibly devastating to the progressive movement. To some people, that makes them think, well, it's not worth it. We're never going to win. I mean, if we can't win in progressive California, where can we win? Well, the answer to that is everywhere else. I've noticed in a lot of places where Democrats have basically left it alone, the establishment has left it alone, and the Republicans have taken over, there is an appetite for progressive policy, and progressives can actually win. Our revolution has a win rate of near 50% in their endorsements, and they're barely even a couple years old. That right there shows you that progressives can win. It's much harder to win in places like California. They're, for number one, are incredibly expensive to run in. And number two, that is the establishment stronghold. It's also difficult to win in Chicago, which is also another Democratic establishment stronghold. New York is the same way. And yet there are wins in New York as well. And I've covered those. Christine Pellegrino, for example, is a great example. She won in a district where Donald Trump had actually done really, really well. So it's a great example of both. She both won in New York and in a Trump district. The future of progressivism is not in California, in New York. The people living there are actually fairly comfortable. They don't have the same kind of hunger for change, revolution, political revolution, as they do in places where the Democrats have left them behind. The future of progressivism is not in California. The future of progressivism is all the places that the Democrats have left alone. Now, so how that relates, of course, to net neutrality is, look, if progressives can win in these places that have been left alone, then we can draft new pieces of legislation that are better than what California has failed to pass. And I think that is the future of the movement, and that's what we should be doing. We should be fighting in all the other places where the Democrats do not have control and they do not have centralized power. And I think that's the only place that we can win, because that's where the money is not. So just take heart, progressives. This is a disastrous loss for, progressive policy. This could have been something that the nation could follow, but the fight is not over. It can happen in other places. We just have to keep fighting to get net neutrality and progressive policies back. Never stop fighting. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.